So yesterday, we started talking about parallel lines with a transversal. And I'm going to emphasize, like I said, the lines are parallel with arrows. So that means a parallel and transversal is basically a line that crosses both parallel lines. Now for today, we're going to learn two different rules. The rules we're going to be looking at, one of them is called corresponding. So corresponding. And the other one is called vertical. I know I'm dealing with two parallel lines in the transversal. So let's see. Let's say those are my parallel lines in the transversal. And again, I'm going to emphasize they're parallel by drawing arrows. And the same thing for vertical. I'm going to emphasize they are parallel. So corresponding, they're both going to be on the same side of the transversal. One of them is going to be in between the lines and one of them is not. An example of corresponding could be this angle with this angle. Notice how they're on the same side of the transversal. One of them is in between the lines, the other one is not, and they're on different corners. Now, the reason why we call this corresponding, the funny thing is that if, let's say this was a piece of paper, and I was to cut this top part right here, and I move it over to this thing right here, to this side. So I overlapped it over here. The two angles that I'm dealing with will overlap. So the angle on the top is corresponding. We mean that they overlap. It is equal to the angle at the bottom. Now, because they will overlap, like I said, this angle, let me call this angle 1, let me call this angle 2. If I cut the corner of where angle 1 is, and I put it right on top of where angle 2 is, it's the same angle. So guess what? They're going to be congruent. Let me emphasize congruent with this symbol. We have used it before. The equal sign means equal size. And then the wiggly thing on top means same shape. So same shape, same size. Now vertical, the other rule we're going to be using, even though I have two parallel lines, I'm only going to use one corner, one parallel line, and then with a transversal. Now vertical is an example of something like this. I know we talked about parallels before. Parallel lines, I said before that the two angles are going to form an X. When an X is formed by the two angles, the opposite angles are called vertical, right? Opposite means far away. The opposite angles are called vertical, and they are also congruent. Remember, congruent means same shape, same size. So let's take a look. Question number 33. I'm looking at this angle with this angle. They're on the same side of the transversal. One of them is interior, one of them is exterior. They're different corners. So this is an example of corresponding. The instructions are going to be solve for X. And I know these angles are congruent, so I'm just going to go 130 is equal to 17x minus 6. I let them equal each other. Let me separate them through the equal sign. I want letters on one side. So I have the 17x on the right side. So I want everything that doesn't have a letter on the left side. So the minus 6, let me cancel it out. I'm going to move it to the left side as a plus 6. Don't forget that I switched the sign, right? From minus, I switch it to plus. If it was plus, I would have switched it to minus. So I have that 136 is equal to 17x. The 136 because I went 130 plus 6. Now let me divide both sides by 17. Because that's the number in front of the x. I want the x by itself. Now 136 divided by 17 is 8. So I have 8 is equal to x. When I ask you solve for x, I'm basically asking what's the value of x? Guess what? It's right there. All right, let's take a look at question number 34. These angles are corresponding. So they're congruent. So I'm just going to write 12x plus 6 is equal to 11x plus 13. Separate into the equal sign. I see x's on both sides, on the left and the right side. Let me move the smallest x. I move the smallest x to avoid negatives. You don't have to move the smallest x, but if you don't, then you're going to deal with negatives. So I'm going to move the 11x. I'm going to move it to the left as a minus 11x, right? I got to switch the sign. The plus 6, I'm going to move it to this side as a minus 6. Got to switch the sign. On the left side, 12x minus 11x is 1x. This is what I mean with I don't want to deal with negatives. Gave me a positive answer, positive 1x. On this other side, 13 minus 6, I know that's 7. X equals 7, I'm done. If there was a number in front of the x, divide both sides by that number. All right, let's take a look at question number 35. My case, my 35 is right here. Now, these angles is what we call vertical. Vertical angles are congruent. That means they're equal to each other. So I'm going to say 15x is equal to 14x plus 5. Now, some questions that I get sometimes is, how do you know which one you write first, the 15x or the 14x plus 5? Which one do you write first? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. So I wrote 15x equals 14x plus 5. I want the x's together. So I'm going to move the 14x. Let me move it over as a minus 14x. I want everything that has a letter on one side and everything that does not have a letter on the other side. 15x minus 14x is 1x. I'm just going to write 1x. On this other side, I have a positive 5. X equals 5. If there was a number in front of the x, technically there's a 1. There's a number other than 1. Divide everything by that number. My instructions are solve for x, so there you go, 5. Let's take a look at number 36. That box, that is 90 degrees. So boxes represent 90 degrees. This is an example of vertical. Notice how it's an X formed by the two angles. For vertical angles, I know the angles are equal. So I'm just going to go 16x minus 6 is equal to 90. Let me separate my sides through the equal sign. I want x's by itself, so the minus 6. Let me move it over as a plus 6. Don't forget to switch the sign. So I get 16x equals 96. To get the x by itself, let me divide both sides by 16. 96 divided by 16 is 6. So there, the value of x is 6. Now let me take a look at 37 and 38. Here, I'm going to throw in lines or marks that are extra, just not necessary. What I want you to focus is this line with this line. So those are my parallel lines, and my transversal is going to be this one. So I'm looking at this angle with this angle. They're on the same side of the transversal, different corners, one of them inside, the other one outside. So that's what we call corresponding. Now, corresponding, the angles are equal. Their angles are congruent. So I'm just going to say that 26x minus 2 equals 24x plus 2. Let me separate them to the equal sign. X is together. So the 24x, let me move it over as a minus 24x. And this minus 2, let me move it over as a plus 2. Notice I switched the signs on everything that I move. On the left side, 26 minus 24, that's going to be 2x. On the right side, positive 2 plus 2, it's 4. So I have 2x equals 4. Let me divide both sides by 2 to get the x by itself. I know 4 divided by 2 is 2. So x is equal to 2. My answer, I would just type in 2. Lastly, let's take a look at number 38. So I see that this line is used. And I see this other line is used for my angles. I already see that I'm dealing with these two angles. There's an X formed. Angles are opposite, so this is what we call vertical. I know for vertical angles, the angles are congruent. That means they're equal each other. So 38x equals 37x plus 2. Separate them through the equal sign. When x is together, so the 37x, let me move it over as a minus 37x. I know 38 minus 37 is 1. So I have that 1x is equal to positive 2. There you go.